I'd like to take up some of the things that Neera said to come back to some of our basic questions. Of course, it's true that discourse of secularism is part of a wider discourse, and it has to be historically located in some sense. The problems we are raising, no matter where you locate it historically, no matter what wider discourse it is part of, these problems will come up. Take the example, for instance, the problem of distinguishing between the religious and the secular, the religious and the political. That problem has come up a zillion times in the Indian debates on secularism. If you look at Constituent Assembly debates, okay, debate on Uniform Civil Code and personal law. So, all participants agree we want a secular state, a secular democracy. And a secular state should not interfere in religion, it should give religious freedom. Now then, some Muslim representatives, some of the Muslim League, some of the Congress, come up with a very interesting argument. They say, see, Sharia is very clearly part of religion because it's ordained by God. You cannot say that it's not part of religion. So our personal law in that sense is religious. It's not part of the political or the secular. Now if it's religious, then the secular state can never interfere. So a secular democracy has to allow Muslims to follow Sharia. And then liberal secularists come in, or secularists. They say, no, religion is only what is private, law can never be part of religion. They come up with their definition of religion, which they've inherited from the Protestant Reformation quite clearly, where religion can never involve law, where religion has to be free from laws because it's supposed to be Christian liberty. Now they say, since personal law can never be part of religion, and the law has to be uniform under a secular democracy, we have to abolish the Sharia Muslim personal law and everyone should follow uniform civil code. Now how are you going to settle that kind of dispute when you don't have a neutral cognitive ground to distinguish what is religion from what is not religion? And this problem comes up in the US. Winnie Sullivan has shown that there are cases in the US where this kind of dispute, and she'll perhaps talk about the specifics, but this kind of dispute becomes endless. And then some judge settles it and says, no, practices like decorating graves are not part of religion because it's not in the scriptures and texts of your religion. So he's an evangelical, clearly. He just takes a Protestant evangelical conception of religion and decides accordingly. Now this is going to keep happening, and notions like religious freedom, state will not align itself with any religion, simply fail to make sense if you cannot tell us how to distinguish between these two. So you might situate it in any other discourse. It is situated in many other discourses. Now, related to that, see, we all know these interpretations of John Locke, who said that the magistrate, it's about power. Neera said the magistrate cannot interfere in religion. Now, I'm willing to sit together with anyone, read John Locke's letter concerning toleration. What he is saying, and he makes it very clear throughout the letter, he says, human beings have a body and a soul. When they create a civil society, it has to do only with their bodies, with their temporal bodies here on earth. Because they are sinful, their bodies are sinful, they need the civil magistrate to restrain them, otherwise they will keep stealing and killing and doing whatever. But since they've only had the original compact and come together in civil society for their bodily welfare and material goods, the soul has nothing to do with this. Because the soul should also always be free to establish its relationship with God, and he means the Judeo-Christian biblical God, and God only has authority and knowledge of the soul. Now this story, Luther had already told this story. Calvin had also told this story. It's not Gandhi is not saying the same thing. He might use similar sentences, but Gandhi is not saying that we have a soul and a body and God can only interfere in the soul and the body is always sinful. He's not saying these things. John Locke is. Why? Because he was a Protestant theologian, Protestant political theologian. So there comes the question of secularization. I mean, how can you show that someone like John Locke had a secular theory of toleration? Well, it's very clearly Protestant theological discourse. So these questions come back again and again. I mean, same with human rights. We can ask a very simple question. Okay, who is the rights bearer? You need a self, right? Who can have the rights, who can bear the rights. If you don't have that, and many Asian traditions deny the existence of such a self, then the notion of human rights doesn't make sense. It's not about being coerced or uncoerced, a consensus or non-consensus. It's about these notions being intelligible in the first place, when you don't have a person or self as a rights bearer.
To come back, I just want to pick up one issue. You see, when I said rights theory has an ancestry, and it begins and ends with Christianity, I meant the conceptual foundation of it. Whether it is the Charter of Human Rights, UN Charter, whether it is some declaration here or there in the 19th century or 18th century, this way of talking about human beings, ascribing rights to them, originated in all the versions of natural rights theories that we know today. In their full form, they originated over a period of 3 centuries of theological discussions. Now, Nehru and others, like most of us here, are also schooled in this way of talking. But we don't know much about it, in the sense that we don't understand very well what the theories of rights say, because we don't understand very well, we don't know very well, the conceptual and philosophical foundations. So, whichever rights theorist you want to take from the modern era, 20th century, whether American or British, German, French, whoever, no matter which politician you take, if you want to talk intelligibly about rights at all, in the sense of natural rights theories talk about human rights, then you cannot but agree that certain notions about human beings are at the foundation of that, because human beings bear the rights. And that notion of human beings, if you go dig deeper to find out what kind of a creature must be, that he can be actively tolerant, gives you some idea. He or she must be active, for example. What does active mean? That means some possibility of, some sense of agency must be there. Agency presupposes goals, purposes of a creature that intends. In other words, when you start unpacking the notion of human rights, you'll end up in only one place. And I've unpacked all theories of human rights that exist today in the world, which are published, of course. And I can assure you that not one of them escapes this. They cannot escape it. It's a conceptual compulsion, because you're talking about certain types of human beings. And this type, I'm saying, of human being is rooted entirely, its foundation is completely submerged in biblical theology. Now, whether Nehru knew it or not is not an issue. I think Nehru knew it in a different way. I mean, I have my own views on that, but I won't talk about that now. So even if Gandhi spoke about human rights in any consistent way, if he did it, it's interesting to know that he did not, then you have to accept that anthropology, and that anthropology is Christian anthropology. Now, nothing against it, because it's Christian. But what I want to know is the following. Why is that so obviously better than other anthropologies that we have, like multiple Indian anthropologies? Why do we need a theory of human rights at all? It presupposes that notion of human being. What if the notion of human being is different? So these are our conceptual cognitive problems that a theory of rights has to address itself to. So, and I say these issues, these problems came up in the context of and presupposing the truth of Christian theology. This is both historically so and conceptually so.
But I also think there's a tendency, okay, we're criticizing a particular secularism in a particular way, but then you end up being pushed in a position, don't you agree that minority rights are good? Don't you agree that democracy is good and we need greater democratization? And all things that are good in the world, it's as though we suddenly oppose those things, but that's not what we want to discuss today. What we want to discuss is, does secularism make sense as a political model? What's the relationship between religion and secularism? And what is secularization? And we don't want to dispute the value of democracy today. Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow.
I hope you make